The blood from her feet left a trail in the sand that would have made tracking her easy for anyone who cared to look. But Victoria Dawson knew nobody was coming back for her. The stagecoach had kicked up a cloud of Texas dust as it disappeared over the ridge, leaving her stranded on the road between San Antonio and Brownsville with nothing but the torn dress on her back and shoes that had given up their souls miles ago. Her uncle had promised her safe passage to her aunt's ranch, had paid the driver handsomely, but when the bandits had stopped them and demanded everything of value, the driver had made a calculation that her uncle's money could not override. 3 shots fired into the air, her carpetbag tossed into the dirt, and the order to get out or get dragged had sealed her fate on this scorching afternoon in July of 1878. She had walked for what felt like hours but was probably less, her throat burning with thirst and her vision beginning to blur at the edges. The sun hung merciless in the cloudless sky, and the road stretched endlessly in both directions with no sign of civilization in sight. Victoria had heard stories about people dying of exposure in the desert, their bodies found weeks later picked clean by vultures and coyotes. She refused to let that be her story, but her legs were beginning to disagree with her determination. When she stumbled for the 3rd time, catching herself on shaking arms against the hard, packed earth, she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from behind. Her heart seized with fear that the bandits had returned, or worse, that some other opportunist had spotted a woman alone and vulnerable. She tried to push herself up, to at least meet whatever was coming with some semblance of dignity, but her body had finally reached its limit. The rider came into view as she managed to prop herself up on her knees. A tall man on a paint horse, his wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the sun. He wore dusty trail clothes, a vest over a worn cotton shirt, and had a revolver on his hip that she noticed immediately. For a moment, she thought he might ride past, and she felt a desperate sob building in her chest at the thought of being left again. But he pulled his horse up short, the animal dancing slightly as he dismounted with practiced grace. His boots hit the ground and he was walking toward her, his face still shadowed by his hat. When he crouched down in front of her, she finally saw his face clearly. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-weathered skin, a strong jaw and startling blue eyes that showed immediate concern. "Madam, what happened?" His voice was deep and rough but not unkind. He reached for his canteen without waiting for an answer, uncorking it and holding it out to her. "Drink slow. Not too much at once or you'll be sick." Victoria's hands shook as she took the canteen, and she had to force herself to follow his instruction when every instinct screamed to drain it dry. The water was warm but tasted like salvation. She managed 3 small sips before he gently took it back. "The stagecoach," she said, her voice coming out as a croak. "They left me." His jaw tightened and something dangerous flashed in those blue eyes. "Left you? Out here? Bandits stopped us." The driver decided I was expendable. She looked down at her hands, scraped raw from her falls. "I've been walking since midday." He looked up at the sun, then at the blood on the road behind her, then at her feet. His expression hardened further. "You're headed which direction?" "Brownsville." "My aunt has a ranch about 10 miles north of town. The Double D spread." He nodded slowly. "I know it. That's still 40 miles from here, and the nearest town between here and there is 20 miles south." He stood up, studying the horizon as if calculating their options. Then he looked back down at her and his expression softened. "You can't walk anymore, not on those feet." "I don't have much choice," Victoria said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "I have to keep moving." He shook his head and held out his hand to her. "I'll carry you the rest of the way." She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "My name is Oliver Quinn. I work for your aunt as it happens. I've been up in San Antonio buying supplies and heading back to the Double D right now. It's Providence that I found you, Miss Dawson, and I'm not about to leave you out here to die." He kept his hand extended. "So I'll carry you the rest of the way. My horse can handle both of us for the distance." Victoria looked at his hand, then at his face. She had been raised to be cautious of strangers, especially men, but she also recognized the truth in what he said. She would die out here if she tried to continue alone, and there was something in his eyes, a straightforward honesty that made her want to trust him. She placed her torn, bloody hand in his calloused one. Oliver pulled her up carefully, his other hand going to her elbow to steady her when she swayed. He was tall, she realized, and solidly built beneath those trail clothes. He smelled of horse and leather and sweat, the honest smells of a working man. He walked her slowly to his horse, each step making her wince, and she saw him notice. "I'm going to lift you up," he said. "It might hurt, but once you're settled it'll be better." She nodded, and then his hands were on her waist, strong and sure, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing. He settled her sideways on the saddle, then swung up behind her with fluid ease. His arm came around her waist to hold her steady, and he shifted her so she was leaning back against his chest. "Comfortable as you can be?" he asked. "Yes," she said, though comfortable was a relative term. Still, being off her feet and knowing she was not going to die alone in the desert made everything feel infinitely better. He clicked his tongue, and the horse started moving at an easy walk. The motion was gentle, and with Oliver's solid presence at her back and his arm holding her secure, Victoria felt the terror that had been driving her finally begin to ebb. She took a shuddering breath and felt tears start to slip down her cheeks. "It's all right," Oliver said quietly. "You're safe now. I've got you." Those simple words broke something loose inside her, and she found herself crying in earnest, all the fear and desperation of the past hours pouring out. Oliver did not tell her to stop or seem uncomfortable with her tears. He simply held her steady and let the horse carry them south while she wept herself dry. When she finally quieted, embarrassed and exhausted, he offered her the canteen again. She drank, more carefully this time, and wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I apologize," she said. "That was not very dignified. You just survived being left to die in the desert," Oliver said. "I think you're entitled to tears. Hell, I've seen grown men cry over a twisted ankle. What you've been through deserves more than tears. Still, you must think me very weak. I think you're alive, which means you're stronger than you're giving yourself credit for." He adjusted his hold slightly, and she realized he was being careful not to hold her too familiarly, despite their situation. "Your aunt is going to be relieved to see you. She got your uncle's telegram saying you'd be on that stage. When you didn't arrive, she was planning to send men out to search tomorrow morning. You know my aunt well. I'm her foreman. Have been for 3 years now. She's a good woman, fair employer. Lost her husband 5 years back and has been running the ranch herself ever since. Does a better job than most men I've worked for." Victoria had never met her Aunt Dorothy. Her father's sister had married young and moved to Texas before Victoria was born, and the distance had kept them apart despite occasional correspondence. When Victoria's parents had died in a fire 6 months ago, leaving her orphaned at 19 with no inheritance and no prospects, her aunt had written immediately with an invitation to come live at the ranch. "What's she like?" Victoria asked. "Tough, smart, does not suffer fools. But she has a kind heart under the business sense." Oliver was quiet for a moment. "She'll be good to you, give you a real home, not just shelter." "That's more than I have now," Victoria said softly. Everything she had owned in the world had been in that carpet bag, tossed into the dirt and likely picked clean by those bandits by now. Her mother's cameo, the letters from her father, the small amount of money she had saved. All gone. They rode in silence for a while, the sun beginning to move toward the western horizon. The landscape was harsh but beautiful in its own way. All browns and golds with scrubby vegetation clinging to life wherever it could find purchase. Victoria had grown up in Philadelphia, where everything was brick and cobblestone and crowds. This vast emptiness was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Tell me if you need to stop," Oliver said. "I know you're hurting, but I want to get as far as we can before dark. I'd rather not camp out here if we can avoid it." "Why?" "More bandits, could be. Also coyotes, rattlesnakes, and just the general discomfort of sleeping on the ground when there's a better option ahead." He pointed toward the horizon. "There's a way station about 10 miles south." "Not much, just an old couple who run it, but they have clean beds and hot food. We can stop there for the night and make the rest of the journey to the ranch tomorrow." The thought of a bed and hot food sounded like heaven. "That would be wonderful. You'll need to let them tend your feet. They've got medical supplies, and Mrs. Harriet knows her way around wounds." Victoria looked down at her feet, hanging limply over the side of the horse. Her stockings were completely shredded, and she could see the raw, bloody mess beneath. It was a miracle she had walked as far as she had. "They're not pretty. They'll heal. Feet are tough and you're young. You'll be walking fine in a couple of weeks if we treat them right." Oliver's voice was matter of fact, not dismissive of her pain but confident in her recovery. She found that reassuring. They continued on as the afternoon stretched into evening. Oliver proved to be better company than Victoria had expected. He did not pry into her past, but when she asked about the ranch and the area, he answered readily. He told her about the cattle operation, the challenges of the South Texas brush country, the way the ranch had grown under her aunt's management. He had a dry sense of humor that made her smile despite everything, and she noticed he was careful to keep the horse's pace smooth for her sake. As the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Victoria saw a small building appear in the distance. It was adobe, low and sturdy, with a corral beside it and a well out front. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth and food. "That's the station," Oliver said. "Jim and Harriet are good people. They'll treat you right." As they approached, an older man emerged from the building, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip until he recognized Oliver. Then his weathered face broke into a smile. "Oliver Quinn, what brings you through here this time? Thought you'd be back at the Double D by now." His eyes moved to Victoria, and his expression shifted to concern. "Who's the young lady?" Oliver dismounted and reached up to lift Victoria down, his hands careful on her waist. She gasped when her feet touched the ground, the pressure sending sharp pain shooting up her legs. Oliver immediately scooped her up in his arms, carrying her like a child. "This is Victoria Dawson, Dorothy's niece. Her stagecoach left her stranded on the road about 20 miles north of here. She needs food, rest, and medical attention." Jim's face darkened with anger. "They left her. Out in the open like that, bandits hit the coach. Driver decided to save his own skin and the other passengers," Oliver said grimly. "I'll have words with the stage line next time I'm in town," Jim muttered. He turned and called toward the house. "Harriet, we've got a guest who needs your help." A short, round woman with gray hair and kind eyes appeared in the doorway. She took one look at Victoria in Oliver's arms and immediately went into action. "Bring her inside. Put her in the back room. Jim, fetch the medical kit and heat water. You, Cowboy, tell me what happened while I examine her." Oliver carried Victoria through the simple but clean interior of the way station to a small bedroom with a narrow bed. He set her down gently on the quilt, and Harriet was immediately there, pushing him back. "Out while I get her out of this dress and into something decent," she ordered. "You can tell me the story through the door." Oliver retreated, and Victoria heard his deep voice beginning to explain what he knew while Harriet helped her out of her torn and filthy dress. The older woman clicked her tongue sympathetically at the state of Victoria's undergarments and the bruises already forming on her shoulders and knees from her falls. "Poor thing," Harriet murmured. "Let's get you into a clean shift, and then we'll deal with these feet." The shift was soft cotton, a little too big but blissfully clean. Harriet helped her lie back and propped her feet up on rolled blankets. When Jim came in with the medical kit and a basin of warm water, Harriet set to work cleaning the wounds. It hurt worse than anything Victoria had experienced before, and she had to bite down on a leather strap Harriet gave her to keep from screaming. Through the pain, she heard Oliver's voice from the hallway, steady and calm, still telling the story. Something about his presence, even just his voice, helped her get through it. When Harriet finally finished bandaging her feet, Victoria was sweating and trembling, but the older woman patted her hand kindly. "You did well, dear. That was the worst of it. Now you just need rest and food and time to heal." Jim brought in a tray with stew and bread, and the smell made Victoria's stomach clench with hunger. She had not eaten since breakfast, 12 hours and a lifetime ago. Harriet helped her sit up and steadied the bowl while she ate. "That young man who brought you in," Harriet said casually. "Oliver Quinn, he's a good one. You're lucky he came along." "I know," Victoria said between bites. "I would have died out there." "More than that, he's a good man. Character, I mean. Jim and I have known him 3 years, since he started working for your aunt. He's honest, hardworking, treats people right, not like some of these cowboys who are all swagger and no substance." Harriet smiled. "Your aunt speaks highly of him, too. Says he runs that ranch like it's his own, always thinking about what's best for the operation and the people who work there." Victoria thought about how carefully Oliver had handled her, how he had not pressed her for information or made her feel uncomfortable despite the intimacy their situation required. "He seems very kind." "He is, and he's about your age, too. 26, I think. Not married, though plenty of women in Brownsville have tried." Harriet's eyes twinkled with matchmaking interest. "I've only just met him," Victoria said, feeling her cheeks heat. "And I'm hardly in a position to think about such things. I have nothing, not even shoes." "Sometimes nothing is the best place to start from," Harriet said mysteriously. "Now finish your food and get some rest. You've had a terrible day, but tomorrow will be better." After Victoria had eaten her fill, Harriet left her to sleep. The bed was comfortable despite its simplicity, and the room was quiet and safe. But Victoria found herself listening for Oliver's voice from the other room, where he was talking with Jim. Something about his presence made her feel secure in a way she had not felt since her parents died. She finally drifted off to the low rumble of male voices and the crackling of the fire in the main room, exhaustion pulling her under like a tide. Morning came with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Victoria woke, disoriented for a moment before memory crashed back. Her feet throbbed dully under their bandages, but the sharp agony had subsided to something more manageable. She sat up carefully and found a simple dress laid out on the chair beside the bed, along with thick socks. Harriet appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by Victoria's movement. "Good morning, dear. How are you feeling?" "Sore, but better," Victoria said honestly. "Is that dress for me?" "It's one of mine from when I was younger and slimmer," Harriet said with a self-deprecating smile. "It should fit you well enough. I'm afraid I do not have shoes that will work over those bandages, but Oliver said he'd rig something up to protect your feet for the ride." With Harriet's help, Victoria dressed and made her way slowly to the main room. Oliver was sitting at the table with Jim, both men nursing cups of coffee. Oliver stood immediately when she entered, his eyes scanning her face with concern. "How are you this morning, Miss Dawson?" "Better, thank you. And please call me Victoria. You've carried me through the desert. I think we're past formalities." A slight smile touched his lips. "Victoria, then. And you can call me Oliver." He pulled out a chair for her. "Sit and eat. We have a long ride ahead, but there's no rush. We'll leave when you're ready." Breakfast was hearty and delicious, and Victoria ate with better appetite than she had the night before. Oliver and Jim discussed the state of the roads and the cattle market while Harriet fussed over Victoria, making sure she ate enough and did not put weight on her feet unnecessarily. When they were ready to leave, Oliver showed her what he had made. He had taken thick leather and fashioned it into protective covers that would go over the bandages, with soft cloth padding inside. "They'll tie around your ankles and keep the worst of the dirt and rubbing off," he explained. "They're not pretty, but they'll work." "They're perfect," Victoria said, touched by the care he had taken. He helped her put them on, his hands gentle and professional, then carried her outside to his horse. The morning was cooler than the previous day, with a light breeze that made the heat bearable. Jim and Harriet saw them off with waves and wishes for safe travel, and Harriet pressed a bundle of food into Oliver's hands for the road. Once again, Victoria found herself sitting sideways on Oliver's horse, his arm around her waist and his solid presence at her back. But this morning, rested and fed and properly cared for, she was more aware of him as a man. The strength in the arm that held her steady, the way his chest moved with his breathing against her back, the faint scent of soap that meant he had washed this morning. "Thank you," she said as they started down the road, "for everything. For stopping, for helping me, for the leather covers. You've been incredibly kind." "Anyone would have done the same," Oliver said. "No," Victoria said firmly, "they would not have. The stagecoach driver proved that." "You're a good man, Oliver Quinn, and I will not let you diminish that." She felt him shift slightly behind her, and when he spoke, his voice was rougher. "You're welcome, then. I'm glad I was there." They rode through the morning, and Victoria found herself telling him about her life before. About growing up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a shopkeeper. About her parents, who had loved each other deeply and had died together when their shop caught fire in the night. About the loneliness of the months since, living with her mother's sister who had made it clear Victoria was a burden. About the relief and terror of accepting her Aunt Dorothy's invitation to start fresh in Texas. Oliver listened without interrupting, his presence steady and comforting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment before speaking. "Loss is a heavy thing to carry. I'm sorry you've had to bear so much of it so young." His arm tightened slightly around her waist just for a moment. "But I think you'll like it here. Texas is a place for new beginnings, and your aunt will be good to you. You'll have a real home." "Where are you from originally?" Victoria asked. "You don't sound like you're from Texas." "Montana Territory," Oliver said. "Little ranch up in the mountains. My father raised horses and I grew up in the saddle." "What brought you to Texas?" His voice was carefully neutral when he answered. "My parents died when I was 21. Influenza took them both in the same winter. The ranch went to my older brother, and we did not see eye to eye on how it should be run. So I left. Worked my way south, doing ranch work wherever I could find it. Ended up in Brownsville 3 years ago and met your aunt when she was looking for a new foreman. She gave me a chance, and I've been there since." Victoria heard the echo of her own grief in his story. "We're both orphans then. Seems so. Do you miss Montana?" "Sometimes, but I like Texas. It's a hard land, but honest. You know where you stand here." He paused. "And your aunt's ranch feels like home now. That's worth more than the place you came from." They rode on, and Victoria found herself relaxing more fully against Oliver's chest. There was something deeply comforting about his steady presence, his calm competence. She had been so alone for so long, managing everything herself, being strong because there was no other choice. It felt like a gift to let someone else be strong for her, even just for a little while. Around midday, Oliver stopped by a creek to let the horse drink and rest. He lifted Victoria down and settled her on a flat rock in the shade while he tended the horse. She watched him move, efficient and sure, and found herself admiring the way he handled the animal with firm gentleness. He brought her food from Harriet's bundle, dried beef and biscuits, along with water from his canteen. They ate in companionable silence, the creek burbling beside them and the breeze rustling through the mesquite trees. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "Anything." "Why aren't you married?" Harriet said women in Brownsville have tried. Oliver looked startled, then gave a slight laugh. "Harriet's a matchmaker at heart. She reads too much into things." He was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I suppose I have not met the right woman. Most of the women interested in me are interested in the position, not the man. Foreman of a successful ranch is a good catch, they say, but I want more than that. I want what my parents had, true partnership, real love." "That's rare," Victoria said softly. "It is. But I would rather be alone than settle for less." He looked at her directly, those blue eyes serious. "What about you? You're young and pretty. Surely you had suitors back in Philadelphia." Victoria felt her face heat at his casual assessment of her looks. "A few. But my father had no money for a dowry, and after he died, I had nothing at all. Suitors disappear quickly when there's no financial benefit." "Then they were fools," Oliver said bluntly. "You're worth more than money." Something warm unfurled in Victoria's chest at his words. She looked away, confused by the strength of her reaction. She had known this man less than a day, and yet she felt more seen and valued by him than she had by men who had courted her for months. They continued on after their rest, and the afternoon passed more quickly than the morning. Oliver pointed out landmarks, told her stories about the ranch and the people who worked there. He described her aunt's house, a sprawling adobe structure with a courtyard and gardens that Dorothy tended herself. He told her about Maria, the cook who had been with the ranch for 20 years and made the best tamales in South Texas. About Roberto, the oldest ranch hand who could track anything and knew the land like the back of his hand. About all the people who would become Victoria's new community. As the sun started its descent toward the horizon, Oliver pointed ahead. "There. That's the boundary of the Double D. We're on your aunt's land now." Victoria looked at the landscape with new eyes. This was home now, these harsh rolling hills covered in mesquite and brush. This was where she would build her new life. The ranch house came into view as the sun painted the sky gold. It was bigger than Victoria had imagined, with real glass windows and a wide porch wrapped around the front. Outbuildings dotted the area around it, barns and bunkhouses and corrals. Cattle moved in distant pastures, dark shapes against the golden grass. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house. She was tall and strongly built, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and a face that showed every one of her 50 years. But when she saw Oliver and Victoria, her expression transformed with relief and joy. "Thank God," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "Oliver, is that her?" "Yes, madam," Oliver called back. "Victoria Dawson, safe and mostly sound." Dorothy Dawson hurried down the porch steps with surprising speed for a woman her age. Oliver dismounted and carefully lifted Victoria down, but before he could carry her anywhere, Dorothy was there, her hands gently touching Victoria's face. "My poor girl. We heard what happened." The stage line sent word that there had been trouble, but they claimed all passengers were accounted for. I knew something was wrong. Her eyes, the same green as Victoria's father's had been, were fierce with anger. "Those bastards left you to die." "Oliver found me," Victoria said. "He saved my life." Dorothy looked at Oliver and something passed between them, a communication beyond words. "Thank you, Oliver. I owe you a debt I can never repay." "Just doing what's right, madam," Oliver said. "Bring her inside." "Maria," Dorothy called toward the house. "We need hot water and medical supplies. Victoria is hurt." The next hour was a blur of activity. Maria, a warm, round woman who clucked over Victoria like a mother hen, helped her into a proper bed in a beautiful room with whitewashed walls and colorful woven blankets. Dorothy examined her feet, her face grim but satisfied with the care they had already received. "Harriet did good work," she said. "These will heal clean if we keep them tended. You'll be off your feet for a week or two, but you're young. You'll recover fully." Victoria, exhausted from the long day of riding, could barely keep her eyes open. Dorothy seemed to notice because she patted her hand gently. "Rest now. We'll talk more tomorrow. You're safe here, Victoria. This is your home now, and I will make sure you're cared for." As Victoria drifted toward sleep, she heard Dorothy's voice in the hallway outside her room, speaking to Oliver in low, urgent tones. "I want to know everything. Every detail of what happened to her and what you observed." Oliver's deeper voice responded, and Victoria heard the anger beneath his usual calm as he recounted the story. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was Dorothy's voice, cold with fury. "The stage line will answer for this. And I'll make sure they know what happens when someone abandons my family to die." Victoria slept deeply and woke to bright morning sunlight streaming through her window. Someone had left a tray with breakfast, still warm, and a small bell with a note in firm handwriting. "Ring if you need anything. Do not try to walk, Dorothy." She ate the eggs and toast, drank the coffee, and was contemplating the bell when there was a soft knock on her door. "Come in," she called. Oliver entered, hat in hand, looking freshly scrubbed. "Morning. Your aunt sent me to check on you. How are you feeling?" "Much better. Rested." Victoria found herself smiling at the sight of him. "Should not you be working? I imagine you have responsibilities." "I do, but your aunt gave me the morning off. Said I'd earned it after the ride yesterday." He moved closer, his eyes scanning her face as if checking for signs of distress. "She also said I should answer any questions you have about the ranch, since I'll be showing you around once you can walk." "Sit, please," Victoria said, gesturing to the chair beside the bed. "Tell me what a typical day looks like here." Oliver sat, his long legs stretched out in front of him, and began describing the rhythm of ranch life. The early mornings, the constant work of managing cattle and horses, the seasonal variations. He told her about roundups and branding, about dealing with drought and disease, about the business side of selling cattle and managing accounts. Victoria found herself fascinated not just by the information, but by the way Oliver spoke about it. He clearly loved the work, took pride in doing it well. His face became animated when he talked about solving a particular problem or the satisfaction of a successful calving season. "What will I do here?" Victoria asked when he paused. "I don't know anything about ranching." "Your aunt has ideas about that," Oliver said with a slight smile. "She mentioned teaching you the business side of things, bookkeeping, managing supplies, correspondence with buyers. She says she's not getting any younger and she wants someone she trusts learning how to run things." "She barely knows me. How can she trust me, your family? And she's a good judge of character. She'll trust you until you give her reason not to." Oliver leaned forward slightly. "But I'll tell you true, Victoria, I think you'll do well here. You've got spine." You survived yesterday, and plenty of people would not have. You'll learn what you need to learn, and you'll make this place your own." The confidence in his voice made Victoria want to believe him. Before she could respond, Dorothy appeared in the doorway. "Oliver, quit monopolizing my niece's time. I need to talk to her." But there was no heat in her words, and she gave Oliver an almost fond look as he stood. "Yes, madam. Victoria, I'll see you later." After he left, Dorothy sat in the chair he had vacated and studied Victoria with those sharp green eyes. "How do you really feel? I want the truth." "Overwhelmed," Victoria admitted. "Grateful, a little scared. My feet hurt, but not as badly as yesterday." "Good. Honesty," Dorothy nodded approval. "I'll be honest with you, too. This ranch is my life's work. My husband and I built it from nothing, and after he died, I've run it myself. But I'm 52 years old, and I need to think about the future. I need to think about who will take over when I can't do this anymore." Victoria's heart beat faster. "And you want me to learn? I want you to try. If you find you hate it, we'll find something else. But I think you might have a talent for it. Your father was always good with numbers and organization. You might have inherited that." Dorothy's expression softened slightly. "I loved your father. He was my little brother, and I always regretted that distance kept us apart. I regret I never met you until now, but I'll make up for that if you let me." Tears pricked Victoria's eyes. "I want that. I want a family again." "Then you have one." Dorothy reached out and squeezed her hand. "Now rest today, and tomorrow we'll start teaching you about the ranch." The days that followed fell into a pattern. Mornings, Dorothy would visit and teach Victoria about the business of running a ranch, bringing ledgers and correspondence and explaining every detail with patient thoroughness. Victoria discovered she did have a head for numbers and organization, and she found the work satisfying in a way her aimless life in Philadelphia had never been. Afternoons, after Dorothy went out to manage the ranch work, Oliver would visit. Sometimes he would bring books from Dorothy's library and read to her. Sometimes they would just talk, conversations that ranged from silly to serious, past to future. Victoria learned about his childhood in Montana, his love of horses, his dreams of someday having his own ranch. Oliver learned about her life in Philadelphia, her parents' love story, her secret passion for reading novels that her mother's sister had deemed frivolous. "I do not think they are frivolous," Oliver said one afternoon, closing the book he had been reading to her. "Stories matter. They teach us about being human." "My mother used to say that," Victoria said softly. "She loved stories too. She sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was. So was my father. I wish you could have met them." "I wish I could have too." Oliver was quiet for a moment. "But I'm getting to know them through you. The way you talk about them, the things they taught you, they live on in that." Victoria blinked back tears. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" "I do not," Oliver said with a slight smile. "I just try to tell the truth as I see it." By the end of the first week, Victoria was able to walk short distances with Oliver's help, leaning on his arm as she made her way around her room and then out to the courtyard. Her feet were healing well, the wounds closing clean just as Dorothy had predicted. By the second week, she could walk on her own, though she tired easily. Oliver took her on slow tours of the ranch, showing her the barns and corrals, introducing her to the ranch hands and the animals. The men were respectful but curious about this young woman who was Dorothy's niece, and Victoria felt their assessment. She tried to show them she was not some delicate city girl who would wilt at the first sign of hardship, asking questions and showing genuine interest in their work. "They like you," Oliver told her one evening as they watched the sunset from the porch. "I can tell." "How?" "The way they talk to you. They are answering honestly, not just saying what they think you want to hear. That's respect." He looked at her, his blue eyes warm in the golden light. "You're fitting in here, Victoria, making this place yours." "I'm trying," she said. "Everyone has been so kind, especially you." Something flickered across Oliver's face, an expression she could not quite read. "I like seeing you here," he said quietly. "It feels right." Before Victoria could respond, Maria called them in for dinner. The moment passed, but Victoria found herself thinking about Oliver's words as she lay in bed that night. It felt right to be here, but increasingly the rightness was tied not just to the ranch or her aunt, but to Oliver himself. She looked forward to seeing him each day with an eagerness that went beyond gratitude for his help. She found herself watching him when he was not looking, admiring the way he moved, the sound of his laugh, the kindness in his eyes. She replayed their conversations in her mind, treasuring each piece of himself he shared with her. This was dangerous territory, Victoria knew. Oliver had been kind to her, but that did not mean his feelings went deeper than friendship. He was her aunt's foreman, and she was newly arrived and still healing. The last thing she should do was develop feelings for him. But the heart did not listen to should or should not, and Victoria was forced to admit, at least to herself, that she was falling in love with Oliver Quinn. The realization terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She had never felt this way before, this consuming awareness of another person. Every time Oliver entered a room, her heart beat faster. When he smiled at her, warmth spread through her chest. When his hand touched hers, even accidentally, electricity seemed to spark between them. Did he feel it too? Sometimes she thought she saw something in his eyes, a warmth that went beyond mere kindness. But she could not be sure, and she was too afraid of ruining their friendship to ask. 3 weeks after Oliver had found her in the desert, Victoria was walking normally and taking on real responsibilities around the ranch. She worked with Dorothy each morning on the books, learning the financial side of the operation. She spent afternoons helping Maria with preserving and planning meals for the ranch hands. She was becoming part of the rhythm of the place, and she loved it. But she loved seeing Oliver most of all. He still made time each day to check on her, though she no longer needed checking on. They would walk the property together in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. The easy friendship they had developed was precious to her, even as she longed for more. One evening in early August, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Oliver said, "There's a dance in Brownsville this Saturday. To celebrate the end of the harvest. The whole town will be there." He paused, and she heard a note of nervousness in his voice that was unlike his usual confidence. "Would you come with me? As my guest?" Victoria's heart leaped. "I would love to, but I do not have anything suitable to wear." "Your aunt mentioned she has some things that might work. She said to ask her." Oliver looked at her directly, and in the lamplight from the window behind them, she could see the intensity in his eyes. "I'd like very much for you to come." "Then I will," Victoria said, her voice coming out breathier than she intended. The next few days passed in a flurry of preparation. Dorothy produced a beautiful dress in deep blue that had been hers 20 years ago, and Maria altered it to fit Victoria's smaller frame. It was fancier than anything Victoria had owned before, with delicate embroidery on the bodice and a full skirt that swished when she walked. On Saturday evening, Victoria dressed with Maria's help, her heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the young woman staring back. The dress fit perfectly, showing off her figure. Maria had helped her arrange her dark hair in an elegant style with a few curls framing her face. She looked older, more sophisticated. "Beautiful," Maria declared. "Oliver will not be able to take his eyes off you." Victoria hoped that was true. She made her way carefully down to the main room where Dorothy and Oliver were waiting. Her aunt saw her first and smiled with approval. Then Oliver turned, and the expression on his face made Victoria's breath catch. He was staring at her with open admiration, his blue eyes wide. "Victoria," he said, his voice rough. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she managed. "You look very handsome, too." He did. He was wearing dark trousers and a white shirt with a vest, his hair neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaved. He looked like he had stepped out of one of those romantic novels Victoria loved, the kind her mother's sister had scorned. Dorothy shooed them toward the door. "Go on, both of you. Have fun. Oliver, you bring her back at a reasonable hour, you hear?" "Yes, madam," Oliver said, but his eyes never left Victoria. He helped her up into a buggy, a nicer one than the utilitarian wagon he used for ranch work. The evening was pleasant, the oppressive summer heat easing as the sun set. They drove toward Brownsville, and Victoria felt giddy with anticipation. "I should warn you," Oliver said as they traveled. "This dance is a community affair. Everyone will be curious about you. Dorothy's niece, the woman who survived being left in the desert. You are a bit of a legend already." "Oh no," Victoria said. "I do not want to be the center of attention. You'll be fine, just be yourself, people will love you." Oliver glanced at her and his voice dropped slightly. "I know I do." Victoria's heart stuttered. Had he meant that the way it sounded? She wanted to ask, but they were already approaching the outskirts of town, and the moment passed. Brownsville was larger than Victoria had expected, a proper town with businesses and homes and a big community hall where the dance was being held. Lanterns hung from the porch, and music spilled out into the warm night. People were streaming toward the entrance, dressed in their best clothes, laughing and calling greetings to each other. Oliver helped Victoria down from the buggy, and she noticed how his hand lingered on her waist a moment longer than necessary. He offered her his arm, and they walked toward the hall together. Inside was a whirl of color and sound. A band played in one corner, fiddles and guitars creating lively music. People filled the dance floor, spinning and laughing. Tables along the walls held food and drink. The whole scene was joyful and welcoming. But when Oliver and Victoria entered, a hush rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, eyes widened. Victoria felt her face heat with embarrassment, but Oliver squeezed her arm reassuringly. Then a voice called out, "That's her. That's Dorothy's niece." And suddenly, people were surging forward, wanting to meet her, asking questions, expressing sympathy for her ordeal and admiration for her survival. Victoria was overwhelmed, but tried to be gracious, shaking hands and answering questions as best she could. Oliver stayed close by her side, a steady presence, gently steering her away when anyone got too intrusive. Finally, the initial curiosity satisfied, the crowd dispersed back to their dancing and conversation. Oliver led Victoria to a quieter corner where they could catch their breath. "That was intense," Victoria said, fanning herself with her hand. "I warned you," Oliver said with a smile. "But you handled it perfectly. You were gracious and kind without letting them overwhelm you. I'm impressed." "I had a good teacher," Victoria said, looking up at him. "You have been teaching me how to navigate this world for weeks now. You're a quick learner." Oliver looked toward the dance floor, then back at her. "Would you like to dance?" "I would love to, but I should warn you, I do not know these dances. In Philadelphia, we did formal quadrilles and waltzes. This looks different." "It is. But the basics are simple. I'll teach you." Oliver held out his hand and Victoria took it, letting him lead her onto the floor. The dance was lively and fun, more about energy than precision. Oliver was a good dancer and a patient teacher, guiding Victoria through the steps with easy confidence. When she stumbled, he caught her smoothly, turning it into part of the dance. They laughed together, and Victoria felt her earlier nervousness evaporate. They danced several dances, fast and slow, until Victoria was breathless and glowing with exertion. Oliver led her outside to the porch where it was cooler, fetching her a cup of punch. They stood at the railing, looking out at the town and the star-filled sky beyond. "This is wonderful," Victoria said. "Thank you for bringing me. Thank you for coming with me." Oliver was quiet for a moment, then said, "Victoria, can I ask you something? Anything? Do you ever think about that day I found you? About what would have happened if I had not come along that road?" Victoria shivered despite the warm night. "Sometimes. I try not to because it frightens me. I would have died, Oliver. There's no question about that." "I think about it too," Oliver said, his voice low and intense. "I think about how close I came to never meeting you. If I had left San Antonio an hour later, or taken a different route, or stopped somewhere along the way. 100 small choices, and any one of them different, would have meant I missed you. But you did not," Victoria said softly. "You were there. You saved me." Oliver turned to face her fully, and in the light spilling from the hall windows she could see the emotion in his face. "I found you, Victoria, and finding you changed everything for me." Victoria's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the moment I saw you in the road. I told myself it was just concern, just wanting to make sure you were all right. But it's more than that. It's always been more than that." He reached out and gently took her hand. "I'm falling in love with you, Victoria. I think I started falling that first day when you were so brave and strong, even though you had every reason to give up. And every day since, I've fallen a little bit more." Joy flooded through Victoria, so intense it almost hurt. "Oliver," she whispered. "I'm falling in love with you too. I have been for weeks. I was afraid to say anything, afraid I was misreading things." "You are not misreading anything." Oliver's other hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle and reverent. "You're the most remarkable woman I've ever met. You're brave and kind and smart and beautiful. You fit into my world like you were always meant to be part of it, and I want you to be part of it, Victoria. Not just the ranch, but my life, my future." Tears blurred Victoria's vision. "I want that too, more than anything." Oliver leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But Victoria did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, had been wanting this since before she even recognized the feeling. When his lips touched hers, soft and warm and perfect, she felt like something in the universe clicked into place. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, learning each other. Then Oliver's arm came around her waist, pulling her closer, and Victoria's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beating as fast as her own. The kiss deepened, and Victoria felt heat flood through her body, desire mixing with love in a way that made her dizzy. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Oliver rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," he said, "so have I." Victoria laughed, the sound pure happiness. "What do we do now? Now we go back to the dance and we spend the evening together. And tomorrow I talk to your aunt about courting you properly." Oliver pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "Because I want to do this right, Victoria. I want to court you and marry you and spend my life with you. Is that what you want?" "Yes," Victoria said without hesitation. "That's exactly what I want." They went back inside, and the rest of the evening passed in a happy blur. They danced more, talked with the townspeople, ate the delicious food. But the real joy was in the small touches, the private smiles, the knowledge that they belonged to each other now. When Oliver drove Victoria home late that night, they talked about their future with the easy confidence of people who knew they were meant to be together. Oliver told her about the piece of land adjacent to the Double D that he had been saving to buy. his dream of building his own house there. Victoria told him she would love to help him design it to make it a real home. "Your aunt will not mind you marrying her foreman?" Oliver asked. "She will be thrilled," Victoria said with certainty. "She has been not so subtly hinting that she approves of you for weeks. I think she has been hoping this would happen." When they reached the ranch, Oliver walked Victoria to the door. He kissed her again, sweet and lingering, before reluctantly letting her go. "I will talk to Dorothy first thing tomorrow," he promised. "I will be waiting," Victoria said. She watched him drive away, then turned to find her aunt standing in the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. "So," Dorothy said, "I take it the dance went well." Victoria could not stop her own smile. "He wants to court me, to marry me." "About time," Dorothy said. "I have been wondering how long it would take you two to figure out what everyone else could already see." "You knew." "Of course I knew. I have eyes, girl, and I have been around long enough to recognize love when I see it." Dorothy pulled Victoria into a hug, rare physical affection from the usually reserved woman. "Oliver is a good man. He will treat you right and love you well. I'm happy for you both." The next morning, Victoria woke early, too excited to sleep. She dressed carefully and was helping Maria with breakfast when Oliver arrived. He looked nervous, which she found endearing on a man usually so confident. Dorothy was already in her office, and Oliver knocked on the door with the air of a man going into battle. Victoria waited in the main room, her heart pounding, though she knew Dorothy would approve. She could hear the murmur of voices but not the words. Then, after what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes, Oliver emerged with a huge smile. Dorothy followed, looking pleased. "Well," Dorothy said, "looks like we're going to have a wedding. Oliver has my blessing to court you, Victoria, with the assumption that it will lead to marriage." "Thank you," Victoria said, going to hug her aunt. "Thank you for everything. For taking me in, for giving me a home, for approving of this." "Your family," Dorothy said simply. "And Oliver is as close to a son as I will ever have. Seeing you two together makes me happy." She pulled back and looked between them. "Now, I expect you both to still do your work around here. No moon-eyed distraction interfering with the ranch operation." "Yes, madam," they said in unison, which made Dorothy laugh. The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Victoria's life. Oliver was attentive and romantic, bringing her wildflowers he found on the range, taking her on evening rides to watch the sunset, reading poetry to her on the porch. But more than the grand gestures, it was the small things that made Victoria fall deeper in love. The way Oliver listened when she talked about her day, genuinely interested. The way he valued her opinions and asked for her thoughts on ranch matters. The way he made her laugh, even on difficult days. They talked about everything, learning each other's depths. Oliver told her about his dreams for his own ranch, and Victoria contributed ideas, the two of them planning their future together. Victoria shared her fears about being a good wife and partner, and Oliver reassured her with patient understanding. "We'll figure it out together," he always said. That's what partnership means. Dorothy watched their courtship with approval, and she began teaching Victoria even more about running the ranch. "You'll need to know this," she said. "When Oliver gets his own place, you'll be helping him run it, and eventually this ranch will be yours. You need to know it inside and out." 3 months after that first dance in Brownsville, on a cool October evening, Oliver took Victoria on a ride to a hilltop overlooking both the Double D and the property he had finally purchased. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air smelled of autumn. "This is where I want to build our house," Oliver said, gesturing to a flat area with good views. "If that's all right with you." "It's perfect," Victoria said, imagining the life they would build here. Oliver dismounted and helped her down, then took both her hands in his. "Victoria Dawson, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. You're my best friend, my partner, my heart. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Oliver kissed her, deep and passionate, and Victoria felt complete in a way she had never known before. This man, this place, this life was everything she had never known to dream of. They married in November, a simple ceremony in the Brownsville church with the whole community attending. Dorothy cried, though she tried to hide it. Maria cried openly and happily. The ranch hands all came and cheered when Oliver kissed his bride. Victoria wore a dress Dorothy had commissioned from a dressmaker in town, white with delicate lace. Oliver wore a new suit that fit his tall frame perfectly. When they said their vows, Victoria's voice was steady and sure. She was choosing this man, this life, and she had never been more certain of anything. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the courtyard and food enough to feed an army. Music played and people danced, and Victoria felt surrounded by love and community in a way she had never experienced growing up. When she and Oliver finally left for the small cabin that would be their temporary home while their house was being built, Dorothy pulled her aside. "Be happy," she said simply. "You deserve it and you have found it. I'm proud of you, Victoria." "Thank you for everything, Aunt Dorothy, for saving me, for giving me a home, for accepting Oliver and me." "You saved yourself," Dorothy said. "You walked through that desert and survived. Everything after has just been you claiming the life you deserve." That first night as husband and wife, Oliver carried Victoria over the threshold of the cabin, and they laughed together at the tradition. The cabin was small but cozy, and Maria had prepared it with fresh linens and wildflowers. Oliver set Victoria down gently and looked at her with love and desire in his eyes. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. "A little," Victoria admitted, "but mostly I'm happy. I love you, Oliver. I love you too, more than words can say." He pulled her close and she felt safe and cherished in his arms. "I'll be gentle," he promised. "I trust you," Victoria said, and she meant it completely. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a discovery of each other that deepened the bond between them. Oliver was patient and caring, making sure Victoria felt comfortable and loved. And when they finally came together fully, Victoria felt a completion that went beyond the physical, a joining of souls as much as bodies. Afterward, lying in Oliver's arms with her head on his chest, Victoria thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the tragedy of losing her parents, to being abandoned in the desert, to being saved by this remarkable man who had become her everything. Life was strange and unexpected, full of pain and joy in equal measure. "What are you thinking?" Oliver asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I'm thinking about that day in the desert, how terrified I was, how certain I was going to die. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not even finished praying." She tilted her head to look up at him. "You said you would carry me the rest of the way, and you have. Every day since, you have been carrying me, supporting me, helping me become who I was meant to be." "We carry each other," Oliver said. "That's what love is. When you're weak, I'm strong. When I falter, you hold me up. Together, we're stronger than either of us could be alone." "Together," Victoria repeated, liking the sound of it. "I like that." They fell asleep wrapped in each other, content and complete. The months that followed were busy ones. Construction began on their house, and Victoria worked alongside Oliver in planning every detail. She had a talent for design, it turned out, and the house that took shape on that hilltop was beautiful and practical. A real home. During the day, Victoria continued working with Dorothy, learning more about running the ranch. She discovered she had a talent for the business side of things, and Dorothy began trusting her with more responsibility. Oliver worked his own land while still serving as foreman for the Double D, a demanding schedule that would have broken a lesser man. But they always made time for each other. Evenings were sacred, time for just the two of them to talk and dream and love. They grew together, learning each other's rhythms, building a partnership that was equal and strong. In the spring, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. She told Oliver one evening as they sat on the porch of their nearly finished house, watching the sunset over their land. "I'm going to have a baby," she said simply. Oliver's eyes went wide and then a smile split his face. "Truly, truly." "Maria suspects, and Dorothy too, though I have not told them yet. I wanted you to be the first to know." Oliver pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she were made of glass. "A baby, our baby." His voice was thick with emotion. "Victoria, you have made me the happiest man alive." "We're going to be parents," Victoria said, the reality of it hitting her. "Are we ready for that?" "Probably not," Oliver said honestly. "But we'll figure it out together, just like everything else." They told Dorothy that evening, and the older woman's joy was evident despite her usual reserve. "A grandniece or grandnephew," she said. "I never thought I would see the day. I'm happy for you both." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Victoria continued working as long as she could, only stopping when Dorothy and Oliver both insisted she was doing too much. Their house was completed in June, and they moved in with excitement and joy. It was perfect, every room exactly as they had envisioned. A home built on love. In late September, as the brutal Texas summer was finally easing, Victoria went into labor. Oliver rode for the midwife while Maria stayed with Victoria, coaching her through the contractions. Dorothy paced the hallway, uncharacteristically anxious. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Victoria thought she could not endure another minute. But Oliver was there, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her she was strong and brave. And finally, after what felt like forever, their son was born. He was perfect, with a head of dark hair and lungs that announced his displeasure at being forced into the world. The midwife cleaned him up and placed him in Victoria's arms, and she looked down at her son with overwhelming love. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "He's perfect," Oliver said, his voice choked with tears. "Just like his mother." They named him James, after Victoria's father, with the middle name Oliver for his father. Jamie, they called him, and he was adored by everyone on the ranch. Dorothy doted on him shamelessly. Maria declared him the most beautiful baby ever born. The ranch hands carved him toys and treated him like a little prince. But to Victoria and Oliver, he was simply their son, their miracle, the symbol of their love made flesh. The years passed, and their family grew. 2 years after Jamie, they had a daughter they named Rose, with her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. 3 years after Rose came another son, Samuel, who was quieter than his siblings but with a stubborn determination that reminded everyone of Dorothy. Victoria and Oliver's ranch prospered. Oliver proved to have his father's talent for horses, and he built a successful breeding operation alongside the cattle. Victoria managed the business side with skill and intelligence, and their reputation spread throughout South Texas. Dorothy grew older but remained sharp and involved. She taught her grandnephews and grandniece to ride, to track, to understand the land. She passed on the wisdom she had accumulated over a lifetime, and the children adored their great-aunt. When Jamie turned 10, Dorothy called Victoria and Oliver to her office for a serious conversation. She was 70 now, her hair completely white, her movements slower than they once were. "I'm getting old," she said bluntly. "I need to make plans for the Double D. I want you to have it, Victoria." You and Oliver and the children. It should stay in the family, and you've more than proven you can run it well." "Aunt Dorothy," Victoria said, tears filling her eyes. "I do not know what to say. Say you'll take care of it. Say you'll keep it going and pass it on to your children when the time comes." Dorothy looked between them. "You've built something good here, both of you. 2 successful operations, a beautiful family. I'm proud of what you have accomplished." "We could not have done it without you," Oliver said. "You took a chance on me, gave me opportunity when I was just a drifter. You took Victoria in and made her family. Everything we have is because of you." "Nonsense. You both worked for what you have. I just provided the chance." Dorothy smiled, a rare, soft expression. "But I'm glad I could do that much. Now promise me you'll keep this legacy going." "We promise," Victoria said. Dorothy passed quietly in her sleep 2 years later at the age of 72. The whole community came to her funeral, testament to the respect she had earned over her lifetime. Victoria grieved deeply, but she took comfort in knowing her aunt had been proud of her, had seen her happily settled with a family and a future. The Double D became officially theirs, and they merged it with their own operation, creating one of the largest and most successful ranches in South Texas. Oliver trained Jamie in horsemanship and cattle management. Victoria taught Rose bookkeeping and business. Little Samuel showed an interest in the land itself, learning to track and read weather signs from the older ranch hands. As Victoria watched her children grow, she often thought back to that day in the desert, dying of thirst and exposure, certain her life was over. She thought about Oliver appearing like a miracle, offering to carry her the rest of the way. He had kept that promise in ways neither of them could have imagined that day. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Oliver surprised Victoria with a picnic on the hilltop where their house stood, the same spot where he had proposed. The children were old enough to be left with the ranch hands for an evening, and Oliver had planned everything carefully. As they sat watching the sunset, Oliver took her hand. "Do you remember the first time I brought you here? Of course. You asked me to marry you." Victoria smiled at the memory. "I cried. You were beautiful. You're still beautiful, more so because now I know all of you, every part." Oliver raised her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I meant what I said that day in the desert, Victoria. I would carry you the rest of the way, and I have tried to keep that promise every day since." "You have," Victoria said softly, "but you were wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "You said you would carry me, but the truth is we have carried each other. Every hard time, every challenge, every joy, we've shared it all, borne it together. That's what has made us strong." Oliver pulled her close and she leaned into his familiar warmth. "You're right. We're partners in every sense, and I would not have it any other way." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. Below them, their land stretched in all directions, the result of 20 years of hard work and dedication. In the distance, they could see their children playing near the barns, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "We've built something good here," Victoria said. "A real legacy, we have. And it all started with me finding a stubborn woman who refused to die in the desert." Oliver's voice was warm with affection and humor, "and me finding a cowboy who was foolish enough to stop and help." Victoria turned to look at him, studying the face she loved so well. He was 45 now, with lines around his eyes and threads of silver in his dark hair. But to her, he was still the young man who had saved her life and then stolen her heart. "I love you," she said, "more now than even on the day we married." "I love you too," Oliver said, "for the rest of my life and whatever comes after." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, they sat together. 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built a life beyond anything either had dreamed. The journey from that dusty road to this hilltop had been long and sometimes difficult, but every step had been worth it. Victoria thought about all the things that had to happen for her to be sitting here now. The tragedy of her parents' death, the cruelty of her mother's sister, the bandits who stopped the stage, the driver who abandoned her. Each terrible thing had been a step on the path that led her to Oliver, to this life, to this profound happiness. She did not believe everything happened for a reason, but she did believe that good could come from tragedy if you were brave enough to keep going. She had been left in the dust to die, and Oliver had said he would carry her the rest of the way. But together, they had walked into a future neither could have imagined, creating something beautiful out of the ashes of loss. Their children's children would work this land someday. The legacy they were building would outlast them both. But more than the physical legacy, Victoria hoped they would pass on the true lesson they had learned. That love was not just a feeling but a choice, made new each day. The choice to stand together, to support each other, to build something greater than either person alone. As the night deepened and the stars filled the sky, Oliver stood and pulled Victoria to her feet. "Come on, let's go home." Home. Such a simple word, but it meant everything. Home was this house they had built together. Home was the ranch they had nurtured and grown. Home was their children, their family, their community. But most of all, home was each other. Wherever Oliver was, that was home for Victoria, and she knew he felt the same. They walked down the hill hand in hand, their way lit by lamplight from the house windows. Inside, they could hear their children getting ready for bed, Maria singing softly in the kitchen, the comfortable sounds of a life well lived. Victoria paused in the doorway and looked back at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there, she hoped her parents were watching, glad that their daughter had found happiness despite the pain of losing them. Somewhere, her Aunt Dorothy was resting, satisfied that her legacy was in good hands, and here in this moment, Victoria was completely content. The scared, desperate girl who had been left to die in the desert had become a woman of strength and purpose, a wife and mother and businesswoman. She had taken the second chance Oliver gave her and built a life worthy of it. "Thank you," she whispered to the universe, to fate, to God, to whatever force had put Oliver on that road at exactly the right moment. Then she turned and went inside, into the warmth and light, into the arms of her family, into the life she had fought for and earned. The door closed behind her, shutting out the darkness, enclosing them all in safety and love. And in the years that followed, as they grew old together, Victoria and Oliver never forgot the value of what they had. They treated each day as the gift it was, knowing how easily it all could have been different. They loved fiercely and fought rarely, and when they did argue, they always remembered that they were on the same team, partners in everything. When Victoria was 81 and Oliver was 88, they sat together on that same porch where they had spent so many evenings. Their children were grown, with children and grandchildren of their own. The ranch continued to prosper under Jamie's management, with Rose handling the business side and Samuel overseeing the land stewardship. Oliver's health was failing. Victoria knew their time together was growing short. But she was grateful for every moment they had shared, every day of the 63 years they had been together. "Do you have any regrets?" Oliver asked one evening, his voice weaker than it once was. "Not one," Victoria said firmly. "Not a single one. My life has been exactly what it was meant to be. Even the bad parts, losing your parents, being abandoned in the desert, even those, because they led me to you, and you were worth every moment of suffering that came before." Victoria squeezed his hand gently. "Do you have regrets?" "Only that I will not have more time with you. Forever would not be enough." Oliver's eyes were still that startling blue, even faded with age. But I'm grateful for what we had. You made my life mean something, Victoria. You gave me purpose and joy and love. I'm a rich man, not in money but in the things that matter. 3 weeks later, Oliver passed away in his sleep, Victoria holding his hand. She grieved deeply, feeling the loss of her partner with every breath. But she did not despair, because she knew how lucky she had been. So many people went through life never finding what she and Oliver had shared. She lived another 5 years, spending her time with her family and managing the parts of the ranch she was still able to handle. She told her grandchildren stories about their grandfather, about the day he saved her in the desert, about the life they built together. She made sure they understood that true love was about more than romance. It was about partnership and respect and choosing each other every single day. When Victoria died peacefully at 86, surrounded by 3 generations of family, her last thought was of Oliver. She imagined him waiting for her, young and strong again, ready to carry her the rest of the way into whatever came next. They buried her beside him on the hilltop, overlooking the ranch they had built and the land they had loved. At her request, the headstone was simple. Victoria Quinn, beloved wife, mother, and partner. She was left in the dust, but love carried her home. And the ranch continued, generation after generation, a testament to what 2 people could build when they found each other and chose to fight for their future together. The story of Oliver and Victoria became family legend, told and retold, the tale of a cowboy who stopped to help a dying woman and found his destiny in doing so. It was a love story for the ages, born in the harsh desert of South Texas, nurtured through hard work and dedication, and lasting beyond death itself. A reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to our greatest blessings, if we're brave enough to walk through them. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Oliver and Victoria walk together still, partners for eternity, their love story finally and truly complete.